Loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. For a very long time, I have read this gospel story about Thomas, and I have focused on the fact that I could identify with Thomas and his wonder, his doubt, his moment of skepticism, his very real humanity, his questions. It's interesting as I reread the story, I find in it a story about the woundedness of life. Much more powerful, much more relevant than the doubt. Because it is very clear to me, not only by what Jesus experienced, but by what every one of us in this life's journey experience, none of us escapes the profound woundedness of this human moment. In the book that we read for Lent, The Will of God, we talked about the events that unfold in our lives, acknowledging the blessings, but also speaking together about the profound pain, the moments of deep, wounding hurt and ache. And we talked about the will of God in the context of all of that. God gets blamed for a lot of things. And we realized that a story told by the Reverend William Sloane Coffin touched every one of our hearts very deeply. William Coffin was chaplain at Yale for many, many years. He was also the minister of Riverside Church, one of our congregations in New York City. He also lost his son in a very tragic automobile accident one dark, foggy, murky night in Boston, when his son took the wrong turn down near the harbor on a familiar road that had been shut down for construction and drove through the barrier into Boston Harbor and died. William Coffin talks about the tragedy of that moment in his life. Someone comes to visit him, and she says, none of us will ever understand the will of God. And William Coffin just churns and churns with this ache. And he writes, after she left, he sits down and he writes, I know that this tragedy, this awful moment in my life is not the will of God. Because God's tears were the first to be shed. Mine were next. His understanding of the nature of God is that God walks with us in this human moment in the center of every wound, in the center of every agony. And Thomas, in the story of the gospel, focuses our attention on the wounds of Christ, which were awful. None of us understands the random accidents. None of us understands the role of the randomness of physics in this journey. Why does a tree fall on a house and kill someone? Why? But we know in our hearts and in our minds, through the very example of Jesus and the sacrifice that was made in living through what he lived through, that death never has the last word. And as difficult as that was for the disciples in the upper room to comprehend, it is equally as difficult for every one of us to comprehend. How do you wrap your mind, your heart, your being, your life around the resurrection? How do you comprehend it? This is the Easter season. It is the moment when the church proclaims with energy and depth of faith the gift of God's renewal of all life. So today, as we begin this Easter journey in this 50 days of Eastertide, every one of us is coping with our own emotions, our own set of belief or non-belief or absolute certainty or doubt. It's all inside us. Our own exhilaration, our own woundedness, it's all there, because not a single one of us escapes the reality of the pain of being deeply wounded on this life's journey. It is one of the why questions. If I am ever good enough to make it to St. Peter's Gate, I am going to say, why all the loss? Why all the heartbreak? It's a real question. But each of us together, by sharing our faith, our love, our hope, our lives, and our deep devotion to a God who is devoted to us, is healed. We are healed in time. That is a resurrection story.